Stakelbeck on terror. I'm joined this week by two top legal warriors who are taking the fight directly to Islamist and Sharia law. Not in the trenches of the Middle East or Afghanistan, but in a different kind of battlefield, the courtrooms of the United States. First, we have David Yerushalmi. He is an expert on constitutional law with an emphasis on the First Amendment. He's been involved in international legal and constitutional matters for over 25 years. He's also an expert on Islamic law, jihad, and national security. And to give you an idea of just how important David is to the cause, he's been identified by none other than the New York Times as, quote, the man behind the anti-Sharia movement. And I'm sure he wears that label with pride. We're also joined by Robert Muise. Robert is an expert on constitutional law who served 13 years in the U.S. Marine Corps, including 9 as an infantry officer. Robert served in the First Gulf War and has been honored by the National Law Journal, among others. Together, David and Robert are founders of a very important new organization called the American Freedom Law Center, and you can find them at americanfreedomlawcenter.org. Gentlemen, welcome. A lengthy introduction, but much deserved and well earned. So we're going to get into the American Freedom Law Center, jihad, Sharia, how Muslim Brotherhood front groups are making inroads legally here in the United States. But first, I have to ask you guys, how did you come together? David, you're a devout Orthodox Jew. Robert, a devout Catholic with 12 children, I might add. Be fruitful and multiply.
Exactly.
Divergent backgrounds, two top legal minds, though. How did you come together?
Well, one might say serendipity, but we believe that there's a guiding hand above. In my capacity as General Counsel to the Center for Security Policy, Frank Gaffney's outfit, I had been involved in the Sharia aspect of Sharia financial transactions. I've written a law review article. We did a major study looking at the use of Sharia adherent committees and imams to guide banks and finance. When the U.S. government took over AIG with taxpayer dollars, the fact is that AIG was the largest Sharia-compliant insurance company in the world.
And the average viewer does not know that, I'm sure, about AIG. They know about AIG's role in the recession, but wow, Sharia-compliant.
Right. So now you had a company that was owned by the U.S. government, paid for with our tax dollars, and they were out promoting not just Islam, they were promoting Sharia. And the Sharia imams that they were employing were promoting all the things that we know goes with Sharia, the jihad, the death for apostasy, all of those aspects.
And our taxpayer-funded dollars were funding this, U.S. taxpayer dollars.
We saved AIG from going into bankruptcy, the taxpayer dollars. And the Fed and the Treasury, through TARP, you recall that program, came in and not only provided funding to keep AIG afloat, took equity. They owned the company. We owned the company as taxpayers. Well, as a result, it was clear to me that we needed to file a lawsuit, to be aggressive, to argue the case that when the U.S. government owns a company that is out promoting not just a religion, but a doctrine, a religious doctrine, and not just any religious doctrine, but one that seeks our destruction, that is certainly a violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. I turned to the Thomas More Law Center, where I knew Robert Muise was senior trial counsel. Robert Muise, in my view, and it's a considered opinion, is probably one of the best, if not the best, First Amendment lawyers in the country in terms of litigation and appellate work. And I asked if they'd be interested, because up until then, none of the typical conservative or even Christian-oriented public interest law firms were prepared to take on the Sharia Islamist enemy.
It's a very politically incorrect thing.
Yes. And what happens when you engage them is they attack you viciously, personally, professionally. Well, Rob, my partner now, a combat Marine, didn't waste a second. I asked and he said, let's go. And we had been working since then, 4 years ago, shoulder to shoulder, day in and day out, on now a dozen cases, protecting the Judeo-Christian foundations of this country against both the secular transnationalist and the Islamist. As a result, we formed American Freedom Law Center just recently to do this full-time and be fully engaged.
And your timing couldn't be better. Robert, tell me what you guys are doing at the American Freedom Law Center. What are your goals here? Some of the fights that you're waging already.
Right, we got a lot of fights. As David said, we're relatively new in terms of the organization, but Dave and I have been working and been engaged in this battle space for 4 years in some of the biggest battles, AIG being one of the big battles. We've got a lot of cases, a whole host of cases. What we do, I think, will be different is that we're exceedingly aggressive. I think we have a lot of experience. When the American Freedom Law Center does a case, the A team is going to be on the case. David and I are going to be doing the litigation, and we're going to be offensive-minded. You know, for too long, I think we've been standing back and just taking blows, and so we're going to go on the attack, and we're going to use lawfare, and we're going to challenge these things like AIG.
And what is lawfare? Describe that. Very interesting and appropriate term for what CARE and these other Islamist groups are doing.
And yeah, that's what they're like. For example, I mean, one case, Pam Geller. You know, she's a conservative blogger. She writes a lot about Islam, Atlas Shrugs, and she was sued by a Muslim for defamation for $10 million. You know, that's the way they silence people. They want to silence people, critics, silence those who want to shed light on what Sharia it is and the threat it is to our national existence, and they do it by filing lawsuits and trying to shut them down.
And lawfare is such a great term to describe it. It's a form of jihadi warfare in the courtroom, and I love what you're doing, guys, because you're taking the fight to them for once, as you said, Robert.
Like AIG, I mean, who would have, approximately $80 billion in counting of taxpayer money has gone to AIG. And you know, when Dave and I got together, and I always joke with David, I say, we have so much in common, it's amazing. I mean, and we've had a lot of theological discussions in ways, and not only have we grown very close as partners, but we've grown very close as friends. And I joke with him, I say, Dave, you know, we were born brothers, you went upstream with Moses, and I went downstream with the Christians. But we bring that real Judeo-Christian fervor to what we're doing. And for us, you know, it's more than just religious liberty. And don't get me wrong, religious liberty is very important. It's about national existence, about national survival. Is our nation going to be the nation where it was founded on the Judeo-Christian values? Is that going to be the nation that we have, you know, for our children, my children? I've got 12 children. I mean, I have a passion for this, and this is a fight. It's a battle. I go to work every day. You know, when I left the Marine Corps, I was an infantry officer, and I saw that so much was changing in our culture, in the courts. And so what I did, I just changed uniforms. You know, I took a solemn oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And we have some serious domestic enemies to our Constitution. And I just feel like I'm just a Marine, just continuing my duty as a Marine to this country, but I'm doing it as a lawyer, and I couldn't have partnered with a better guy to do it.
Yeah, and we love your passion. You know, I wanted to ask you guys, we're talking about cases involving Christians, Jews being persecuted, really, by Islamists. One case sticks out in my mind, guys, that you're working on. We actually highlighted it here on the Stakelbeck on Terror show about a year ago. 4 Christian, I guess you would say evangelists, in Dearborn, Michigan. We call it Dearbornistan on this show. I've walked those streets in Dearborn. I've interviewed radical imams in Dearborn, Iranian-connected Islamists, bad guys in our country. But these 4 Christians were at an Arab cultural festival in Dearborn. They were locked up, put in jail. Elaborate on that a little bit, David. What happened there and how you guys are taking up their cause now?
Well, it really goes back even before then. Dearborn, and Dearbornistan is exactly the right term, because the process of civilizational jihad, which you've covered on this program many times, where the Muslim Brotherhood says, we're going to use your laws, we're going to infiltrate and turn them on its head. Well, Dearborn passed an anti-pamphleting law. And a client of Rob's, before we were together, sued because it was clearly unconstitutional. You can't prevent someone from free speech in public.
Just handing out a tract on a street corner.
Street corner.
Basically.
And Rob won that lawsuit, and the court just recently awarded him $100,000 in legal fees. Now, that's a sting to Dearborn. But they're a serial violator of the Constitution because a year later,
the city
of Dearborn, the mayor, O'Reilly, the police chief, Haddad, and the network that makes up the city fathers, as it were, and mothers.
And mind you, they're concerned about these Christian evangelist guys, yet there have been Hezbollah supporters arrested in Dearborn. I have interviewed leaders in the Muslim community in Dearborn who have openly supported Hamas and Hezbollah, yet the mayor of Dearborn is concerned about those pesky, dangerous Christians.
So the Christians come out during the Arab festival to simply talk to the individuals there, normal discourse, had a video camera, thank God. And as they were having a conversation, the organizers of the festival, together with their security, who were essentially aligned with the police, began to complain that the Christians were causing a security problem.
And we have the video here, David. They were, I mean, the Muslims at this festival were surrounding these 4 guys, peaceful guys, aggressively surrounding them.
But they were all just talking what we would talk about, religion,
right,
politics, whatever it may be. But that's precisely the free speech that the Constitution protects. There was no breach of peace. And they were arrested, spent the night in jail.
And we're going to get into that a bit more, guys. We're going to head to a commercial now, but much more coming up with David, Robert, the founders of the American Freedom Law Center. Stay tuned. David Yerushalmi, Robert Muise, the founders of the American Freedom Law Center. And Robert, when we went to the commercial, we were talking about this Christian missionary case in Dearborn, Michigan. You were intimately involved in that case. Tell us a bit more about it and where it stands now.
Right, and Dearborn is about 40 miles from my house, so it does have an impact on me in a personal way as well. The Christian missionaries, well, this case, they were arrested in 2010, but it goes back to 2009. Nabil Qureshi and David Wood, 2 of the missionaries who belong to an apologetics group called Act 17 Apologetics.
We have interviewed them here at CBN.
Yeah, and they have a special ministry to Muslims. In fact, Nabil is a Muslim convert. And from his perspective, the most important decision he ever made in his life was to become a Christian. And he wants to share that and share the gospel with Muslims. And what better place to do that than at a Muslim festival in the city of Dearborn, which has one of the largest concentration of Muslim population. So they went in 2009, and they went to a booth that said, if you got questions about Islam, we have answers. And being an apologist, they took one of the flyers and said, do you mind if we come back tomorrow and we have a discussion about this? And would you mind if we videotape? Because we use videotape as part of our ministry. And they said, fine. So they came back that next day. And I don't know if your viewers probably have seen this video. It went viral on YouTube in 2009. They titled it Sharia in the USA. They were literally forced out of that festival by an army of yellow-shirted security guards who were physically assaulting them, striking their camera. They had to have police escort.
And these guys were peaceful. They were not aggressively preaching. No, and just tell us about their background, too, Robert. These Christians, these guys who are very established gentlemen.
Absolutely. Nabil Qureshi has his MD. He's actually, I think he's getting an advanced degree in religious studies at Duke University. David Wood is a professor of philosophy at Fordham University. So these aren't your criminal types.
These are not thugs.
Not thugs at all. They're very smart. They're very effective, and they evangelize in a very loving way. You know, and you can see it on the video.
Yes.
Well, when they did this video in 2009, it went viral, and the city got a lot of negative criticism, as well as the festival, rightfully so, for the way they were treated. And so when they went back in 2010, they were promised by the police that these thugs, these festival thugs, would not be there, that it would be a peaceful place, and that they could come back and evangelize, and it would be peaceful. So they came back in 2010, and thankfully they brought video cameras with them to videotape every minute that they were there. They were there peacefully evangelizing, and no doubt they had a target on their back. And when you look at the facts,
they were bold to go back. We were saying during the commercial.
This
Give
was
them credit.
Pure retaliation. There's no doubt about it. And when you see that video of Nabil Qureshi talking to this group of young Muslims, it was a very civil dialogue in the street. There wasn't a crowd. He had a microphone, but it wasn't amplifying sound. It was just to pick up the sound for the tape recording. Next thing you know, from out of nowhere comes this army of police officers who take his microphone, take his hands, put him behind his back, and put him in handcuffs. And they drag him back to jail, and these guys spend a night in jail, and they get criminally charged with breach of the peace. I defended them in that criminal trial. It was a week-long criminal trial. That last video I used in my closing argument. I showed it to the jury. And after I showed it and just paused, and I said, did what you just see there, did that just happen on a city street in the United States of America? Yeah. I mean, it is that jaw-dropping. Yeah. And they were acquitted. All of them were acquitted, not guilty findings. We turned around and David and I filed a 96-page civil rights lawsuit against the chief, the mayor, the chief of police, 17 police officers who were involved, and festival workers who were involved. And that case is ongoing. In fact, we just had a very, very favorable decision from a judge. The city moved to dismiss the lawsuit. And the judge just ruled in our favor, said no, there's enough, the allegations are sufficient to go forward with this civil rights complaint. And you know, the city needs to pay for this, because it was egregious. And when you see that, when you see this video, it is utterly shocking that happened. Yes. But that is the stealth jihad. That is the influence of Sharia. That is the civilization jihad, how the First Amendment is being suppressed.
And we're going to talk about that more coming up, guys. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Sharia in America. Much more coming up with David and Robert. Stay